you want to put it in?
It's up to you. I did
They told me they said
Good afternoon.
start that.
Welcome to the March 11th Planning Board meeting. We're going to call this meeting to order, and we are going to take a moment of silence, please. Rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amanda, do we have any items of information?
Yes, we have a couple of items. First of all, I'd like to introduce our new planning board member, Preston Mitchell. Preston hails from Chattanooga and is a graduate of College of Charleston and the Form-Based Code Institute through Virginia Tech and the Academy for New Urbanism. He's an AICP certified planner. And before joining the firm, he spent 23 years in municipal planning and development. Most recently for the development director for the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, but he also worked for about 14 years in Salisbury, North Carolina. So he and his family live in Scotts Mill, and we're happy to have him on the planning board.
Thank you.
And then also we have two additional public meetings for the Western Big Branch Area Plan. If you were not able to attend the session at the Senior Center last week, there's two more opportunities. The first is Monday, March 18th at Pleasant Plains Baptist Church from 4 to 6 p.m. Please note that this site is not accessible, so if you have accessibility issues, then the New Hill Community Center would be a good opportunity. That's on Wednesday, March 20th from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. The same information is presented at all three sessions and is also available online at the website that's on the screen. That's it.
Thank you, Amanda. All right, next we have on the agenda is public comment. The purpose of public comment is to allow the public to speak on any items that do not appear in the agenda under the public hearing section. Any member of the public wishing to comment on a public hearing item will be called at that time. Public comment is a period of opportunity of the public to express concerns or opinions, but is not intended to be a question and answer session. During the public comment, the public may comment on any non-public hearing items, including new business that appear at the end of the agenda. If there's a large number of speakers for one particular item, you may be asked to choose a representative to speak for the entire group and limit those comments to no more than 9 minutes. If not, comments on a single topic should not be repetitive in nature. If comments were already made by another speaker, please state in agreement with the prior speaker that you do not need to repeat. All right, do we have any folks who are signed up for public comment? If you have not signed up, please do so over here.
We do.
Thank you, Jerry. All right, Miss Elizabeth, sit.
I'm sorry, it's my phone ring.
They have great timing.
Should have turned all the speakers off. Sorry about that.
Elizabeth Raystead, 3113 Friendship Road. Good afternoon. So as Amanda was telling you about the open houses, I live out in the ETJ, which is a part of the plan. And I would really appreciate if you guys would come to one of the open houses to at least talk with some of us that live out there so that you can understand some of our concerns and wishes and desires for our community. I have to start out and say it is really difficult for a lot of people in my community to go to these open houses because these are our homes, these are our properties. And you hear people make, well-intended comments of like, oh, this would be good here, this would be good there. And you're like, wait a minute, that's my house, that's my yard, that's my pasture. What do you mean you're going to put a road through here? It's hard because you think that you have property rights, this is your home, this is where you raised your kids. So sometimes it's really hard for us to come into an environment like that. But what's even harder, I've learned, is getting letters from the town to say, hey, here's your 30-day notice. We're going to come onto your property to do field work under your rights under eminent domain. But if you know who the letter's coming from, it's not as hard. And if we know you guys and have a opportunity to ask you questions and get to know you, at least when you're making the hard decisions about what's coming next to our property, it's not as hard or as difficult. And I've done a lot of town council meetings. Everybody here pretty much knows me. And I'm wanting to help try to bridge in some of the gaps that we have. We don't have enough opportunity to understand who is making the decisions, and we certainly don't understand all the UDO. There's a lot about the UDO that we're still trying to figure out and understanding what can we ask for. You know, we may not be able to get everything we want or need, but what is that happy medium? What will you support? What will you not support? And we can't get to that if we don't have conversation, if we don't have opportunities to interact and actually come to these meetings. You know, you guys are all sitting up there, you know, when we walk in, and unless we want to be brave enough to start just like going down and talking to everybody, there's really not a meet and greet before or after. So I hope that at least you'll take the opportunity to come to the 2 open houses to meet with some of us. And if any of you want to ever reach out to me, people have my contact info. I know a lot of people would like to reach out to y'all, but you don't actually have your emails posted on the website. It's just a generic email. And people feel like, well, if I send an email to that, it's just going to go into la la land. So I just share all of that. And, you know, I have to thank Randy for coming to the last one. I didn't get to corner him with questions, but maybe next time. But look forward to getting to know all of you and having more conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, if there's no additional public comments, we'll move on to our consent agenda. So everyone's had an opportunity to take a look at the minutes from the February 12th meeting, and I'll ask if there is a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
Thank you. I have a second.
Second.
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes unanimously. All right, we're going to move on to public hearings. Again, if you're here to speak on behalf of an item that's listed in public hearings, please feel free to sign up over here. And public hearing number 1 is with Lauren on a possible hearing and a public hearing and possible motion regarding rezoning case 22CZ27.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
All right, good afternoon. This is rezoning case 22CZ27, Center City Townhomes. As you all may recall, this rezoning, with the exception of 1328 Center Street, was originally scheduled to be heard at the May 8th, 2023 Planning Board meeting. Since the continuance, this parcel located at 1328 Center Street was added to the rezoning. The applicant held new neighborhood meetings and attended another EAB meeting. The properties are located in this general area south of Center Street. The subject properties are approximately 4.1384 acres and are located south of Center Street, east of the Grove subdivision, north of Apex Flex Storage, and west of Calvary Chapel, Cary. 3 of the parcels contain existing structures, and all the parcels contain existing vegetation. The parcel located at 1328 Center Street contains an existing structure that is proposed to be relocated to the proposed O&I conditional zoning district. The properties are currently zoned high-density, single-family, residential agriculture, office and institutional conditional use, and light industrial conditional use. The adjacent zonings are to the north, planned unit development conditional zoning, to the east, office and institutional conditional use, to the south, light industrial conditional use, and to the west, plan unit development, conditional use. The applicant is proposing to rezone the properties to high-density, multifamily residential, conditional zoning, and office and institutional conditional zoning. The 2045 land use map classifies for the subject properties as office and employment. The proposed rezoning of a portion of the properties to office and institutional conditional zoning is consistent with that land use classification. The proposed rezoning of the remainder of the properties to high-density multifamily conditional zoning is not consistent with that land use classification. If the properties are rezoned as proposed, the 2045 land use map for the properties to be rezoned to high-density multifamily conditional zoning will automatically be amended to high-density residential. A letter of impact from Wake County Public School Systems was received for this rezoning and is included in the staff report packet. Wake County Public School Systems indicates that elementary, middle, and high school grade level within the current assignment area for the proposed rezoning development are anticipated to have insufficient capacity for future students. Transportation to schools outside of the current assignment area should be anticipated. School expansion or construction within the next 5 years may address concerns at the elementary and high school grade levels. The initial letter of impact was sent on February 9th, 2023. Staff requested an updated letter on February 6th, 2024, and Wake County Public School System indicated that the initial letter was still accurate. The applicant conducted neighborhood meetings on November 3rd, 2022, November 30th, 2022, November 3rd, 2023, and February 15th, 2024, and a copy of the neighborhood reports are in your packet. A full list of the proposed uses and zoning conditions can be found on page 2 of the staff report. The applicant is proposing residential uses such as townhouse and uses associated to the residential development, and non-residential uses such as office, business, professional, real estate sales, and financial institution. Besides the architectural zoning conditions related to townhouse and the non-residential, if the existing non-residential structure to be relocated is demolished or destroyed, there are a few zoning conditions I would like to point out. There shall be a maximum of 30 dwelling units. The applicant is proposing to provide at least one residential unit at 100% AMI with a minimum affordability period of 10 years. Housing staff would support one affordable unit if the platted unit count is 29 or less. If the final unit count is 30 or greater, staff recommends 2 affordable units. The landscape buffer along Calvary Chapel property may be reduced to 20 feet to provide public street access to Center Street for alignment with Myrtle Grove Lane. Construction and dedication of a public residential street from the intersection of Myrtle Grove Lane at Center Street to the residential parcels is required for the first residential subdivision plat. No additional access points to Center Street shall be permitted. The length of a public street cul-de-sac may be permitted to exceed the requirements of the UDO. A subject to approval of NCDOT and the town, a 5-foot concrete sidewalk shall be constructed along the property's Center Street frontage. A stub street shall be provided on the eastern boundary of the subject property adjacent to Calvary Chapel. And the last one I wanted to point out, to kind of summarize this, this exhibit here kind of shows the most recent NCDOT U5825 plan. So this zoning condition is related to the NCDOT preliminary plans for the project and what would require more of a way, more right-of-way than per the town's transportation plan. And a condition has been proposed to reduce the buffer to accommodate the existing width. This exhibit on the slide, like as mentioned, it kind of just shows the preliminary NCDOT plan that we have. It's the most accurate one. It kind of shows you the anticipated offset from the center line towards this property. The widest is on the western side and closest is 65 feet. It shows a median in the center, so no left in, left out for this development. This slide references the history of the land use map designations for the properties at the time of Peak Plan 2030, Advanced Apex, and the land use map designations when the parcels were purchased. This information is also included in your staff report. With Advanced Apex, all the properties were changed to office employment due to the future impacts to access by NCDOT's widening of Center Street. The Environmental Advisory Board held a pre-application meeting for this rezoning on November 17th, 2022. A new meeting was held on January 18th, 2024. After the additional parcel was included, the zoning conditions suggested by the EAB at the meeting are listed on page 7 of the staff report. And they're only from the January 18th meeting since of the new additional parcel. Transportation staff have concerns of this rezoning along Center Street. Staff recommended the applicant dedicate the right-of-way and easements consistent with the latest available design of State Transportation Improvement Program, Project U 5825, improvements to 1010 Road. The applicant has addressed this recommendation with a proposal to reduce the buffer along Center Street. Specifically, the proposed condition states, at the time of construction drawing approval, the applicant shall be required to dedicate additional right-of-way for Center Street consistent with the latest available plans for the DOT widening project, subject to the following: the buffer along Center Street required for development of the property shall be reduced on a 1-for-1 basis for each foot of additional right-of-way needed for the DOT widening project, but in no case shall be less than 15 feet in width. The proposed zoning conditions comply with staff's recommendations for public street access limited to a connection to Center Street at a full movement intersection across from Myrtle Grove Lane. However, the proposed zoning condition states that a cul-de-sac length may exceed the UDO thresholds. Additional access points to Center Street are not recommended by staff based on the available street frontage and are excluded from consideration by the proposed zoning conditions. Access may be restricted to ride in, ride out when Center Street is widened and a median is constructed by NCDOT in Project U 5825. Currently, only preliminary engineering is funded by the state. If the proposed rezoning is approved, the applicant will be required to submit a traffic impact analysis at the time of site and subdivision plans. If the proposed development is anticipated to generate over 1,000 daily trips or 100 peak hour trips. If the projected development trips fall below the TIA threshold, the applicant will be required to comply with minimum NCDOT requirements for safe ingress and egress. Planning staff recommends denial of rezoning case 22 CZ 27 Center City Townhomes with conditions offered by the applicant. The 2045 land use map classification for the subject properties is office employment. The proposed rezoning of a portion of the properties to office and institutional conditional zoning is consistent with that land use classification. However, the proposed rezoning for the remainder of the properties to high density multifamily conditional zoning is not consistent with that land use classification. If the properties are rezoned as proposed, the 2045 land use map for the properties proposed will automatically be amended to high density residential. A vehicular connection to the townhome development to the west cannot be made, and any connection made to the east will be to non-residential land uses. Given the future access limitations to Center Street, development of those subject properties will become more reliant on future cross access through the properties to the east to Investment Boulevard. Therefore, the current office employment classification should be retained. Approval of the rezoning is not reasonable and in the public interest because the proposed high-density multifamily conditional zoning district is not consistent with the 2045 land use map. The change from office employment to high-density residential affects the economic development potential of the area, as it would reduce the amount of land available for tech flex and/or office and institutional near the Investment Boulevard office and industrial park. The residential properties would be adjacent to properties zoned light industrial, and if the light industrial properties redevelop in the future to a higher light industrial land use classification, there could be potential issues and hazards. They will have no connectivity to the residential development to the west. The development will have reduced buffers when NCDOT widens Center Street. The future access to this development will be right in, right out due to the future median location and cross access through the Calvary Church's parking lot to reach Investment Boulevard would be advantageous. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Russell's in the audience for any transportation questions, and the applicant's in the audience as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for Lauren?
It might be a Russell question, Lauren, but U5825, you said that that's currently funded for design only. What is the trajectory of where that would go? Like, when could that potentially get funded fully for construction, and what would that schedule look like? Do you know? Or maybe Russell could.
I think Russell, because I know as of now, we just have the plans for now, or at least being worked on, so I'll let him
I guess most
answer.
importantly, when would right-of-way acquisition or right-of-way letting be? If the
Yeah, the current STIP goes out to 2033, and there's no funding for right-of-way or construction up to that date.
If because there's a project out there that's studying this corridor, if the applicant were to apply for a DOT driveway permit, would DOT likely restrict the movement knowing that this study is ongoing, or would they say, well, it's not funded until 2033, so they could potentially get a full access movement?
I don't know if the TIP project would necessarily affect their access in the interim. I think they'd be looking for whether or not it could operate safely until the TIP project happens. So that's it could potentially work as a full movement in the interim.
Russell, I have a question. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to like what the limitation is to only having that one access point at Myrtle and not being able to have another one like on the residential side.
Well, there is a stub being provided to the east, so it's the hope that, you know, when the DOT project happens or prior to that, maybe there could be some kind of a cross-access agreement worked out with the adjacent property, but there's no guarantee of that. So what would happen is, you know, if the project implemented a right-in, right-out type access, there might be a U-turn nearby, so people would have to use those U-turns or find an intersection to U-turn at to make what would otherwise be a left turn. So it could be more of an inconvenience, and in particular that's more problematic for residential uses if they're used to having a full movement for a long time, and then the state comes in and restricts it. That wouldn't be very popular with the residents.
Thank you.
And I'm assuming this one egress and regress is going to be the case, whether residential or Teleflex light industrial, we're still with the one in and out.
That's right.
Okay. Well, okay. And with the cul-de-sac, well, this may not be for you. And that creates the problem with the cul-de-sac being too long against the UDO. Did I understand that correctly? And when we only have one access, if the cul-de-sac's too long, it really is, then there's no other alternative for the property owner at this point, is there? I mean,
well, the zoning condition is written to allow the longer cul-de-sac, so you wouldn't run into that issue when it came forward as a subdivision and site plan. Because, and one reason we didn't want a second point of access is because of the limited frontage on Center Street, and it's so close to the adjacent intersection at Old Grove Lane. So we actually recommended the single point of access and a future stub to the east. We didn't want any additional access to the west.
Any additional questions for Russell or Lauren?
Lauren, I've got a question for you.
Thanks.
For Myrtle Grove, do you know what the setback is currently off the center line of Center Street, roughly?
I don't know offhand, but maybe
Are you asking for the setback of the buildings from the center line of the road, or?
Yeah, well, I'm trying to see, this kind of, I'm looking at this map here, I can't really tell, I'm just trying to figure out how close these are gonna, like, what that, if we're reducing the buffer in the future, how close are these buildings gonna be sitting to Center Street? Versus what's to the north, where you have a larger setback.
Yeah, the ones to the west look like
Right.
really, really close.
Right.
And what is that setback? That's a
Right.
good question.
That's a great question.
The townhomes to the north dedicated additional right-of-way when they were subdivided. And I believe had a reduced buffer because the anticipation was that the right-of-way that they dedicated was allowing for the future road improvements. Maybe not, this was not envisioned at that time, but that's my recollection of those approved subdivision plans.
Thank you, Amanda.
You have additional questions for Lauren? Thank you, Lauren. Applicant would like to speak? Oh, did you have a question, Tim?
I'm saying thank
Oh,
you.
okay.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, Jason Barron with Morningstar Law Group. Pleased to have the opportunity to talk to you about this case. It's an interesting one, and I'll try to unpack a little bit of it because it's not a huge site, but it's got plenty of tricks to it, and hopefully we can have a good dialogue about it. Here with me tonight is Jeff Roach with Peak Engineering. They've been doing engineering and design on the site. Additionally, the owners, Mark Block and Mike Finari, are here as well. Just a little bit of background in terms of how this site sits, just to kind of put into context relative to what the current land use plan recommendation is, what it was when my client started assembling the property. Essentially the eastern acre and a half of our site is being designated for O&I as part of this zoning case, which is consistent with the land use plan. And so if you do the math, we have a total of 4.1 acres of property that we're seeking to zone a combination of high-density multifamily and O&I. Roughly an acre, half of that is consistent. So we're really talking about 2.5 acres of land that is technically not consistent with the town's land use plan. We believe that the combination that we're proposing between residential and what I would consider more neighborhood-oriented style office is more appropriate for this location for a variety of reasons. As you all are aware, continues to be a significant housing crisis in this market. People are continuing to flood our market and looking for places to live. The style of product that we're talking about here, in addition to the fact that we do have a condition that meets the affordability recommendation of the town by having a single unit at 100% AMI, I will tell you that these are units that won't have garages, so they're going to be smaller. They're going to be kind of more naturally occurring affordable housing. And I don't want to carelessly use those terms, but I do want to let you know that as a result of not having garages, the units are smaller by their very nature, and so it reduces the overall cost of construction, thereby reducing the ultimate end cost to folks who would be living here. But this is a tricky site. If you look at it just on the aerial alone, right, you've got a very large residential project across the street to the north. You've got existing residential located to the west. You've got residential north and west. And then you've got O&I zone property here, and you've got flex industrial here, but really no location, no ability to connect those two. I think those are self-storage buildings that are behind us to the south. And so if you kind of put the context of where this is, it's really just it's a matter of trying to figure out where the appropriate transition from kind of the employment-based uses are to the residential that we're talking about. A couple of things. Again, what we're proposing are townhomes that are generally consistent with the townhomes to our west. The staff report notes that one of the reasons why they don't support the case in this instance is because we don't have an access to the west. If we could, we would. That property's already been built, and there is no stub road being provided to us. So that's really something that's out of our hands, whether it's zoned consistent with what we're asking for, or if it's developed consistent with the town's land use plan. As is noted in the staff report, when my clients acquired the first site, and you probably can't see it very well, but it's essentially what you would consider a flag lot. It's this minimal frontage piece, and it kind of opens up here at the back. They acquired that site back in 2018, late 2018. At that point, the town's land use plan called for, I would say, roughly half to 3/4 of this overall site to be designated to be planned for residential, and the rest O&I. They actually reviewed the land use plan when they made the first acquisition that they had, and with an eye towards trying to assemble the additional property so that they could deliver a townhome development that was in keeping with what they believed the town's land use plan was. So consistent with that, and actually they met with the town to talk about the idea relative to developing residential in the site, were made aware of what the land use plan classification was, and they set about going to acquire the remaining properties. They weren't aware that the land use plan changed during that time. And I know that's not relevant per se in terms of kind of where the town sits, because ultimately it's the town's job to do the forecasting of what do the next 30 to 25 to 30 years look like. But I do want you to know that they weren't aware that the land use plan was changing as they were assembling these properties. In fact, the vast majority of the sites that they acquired during this process were acquired within 6 to 8 months of the change to the land use plan that they just simply didn't know about. And again, it's neither here nor there, but I do want you to know this isn't a situation where they were aware that the town had made a change in expectations and they said, forget it. We don't care what the town has to say about it. We're going to plow ahead with residential and hope for the best. This is a situation where they genuinely thought the town was expecting to get residential here with some office, and that's what they've been working on. As was noted in the staff report, we thought we were going to be here a little less than a year ago, but there were concerns relative to this parcel here in the middle. At that point, Mike and Mark had not been able to get that property under contract. It's an old residential building. It's a house that's being used for non-residential purposes. They had been talking to that owner, and they essentially put the zoning case on ice so that they could close that loop. So they didn't have a donut hole in the middle, which created challenges, not just from a planning of the overall development standpoint, but certainly created challenges with respect to improvements to Center Street. And that's something that we heard from transportation staff real early in the process. And so as the case was going along before we were supposed to get here back in the spring, Mike and Mark were still working with that owner to see if we could bring them into the fold, move that office building to a site to the east to kind of create that transition and create a more complete, what we believe, complete and appropriate mix of residential and office on the site. And that's what you see today. And that plan is to move that office building kind of in this location here, line up the access. The access, again, a single point of access. I think our initial layout showed 2 points of access. We received, feedback from staff early in the process, not wanting to see two points of access for the site to kind of reduce curb cuts, which is what everybody's trying to do. And so we worked with Russell and his team to come up with a plan that would essentially allow us to tee our access in across from Myrtle Grove and the cul-de-sac discussion, and you don't see a plan, but essentially what's going to happen is there will be a road that comes in and kind of winds its way around and then terminates in a cul-de-sac up here. So the original anticipation was a second access somewhere out here. That was eliminated in favor of a cul-de-sac, again, to try to prevent unnecessary curb cuts out onto Center Street. From an overall use standpoint, and you all know this, I mean, it's hard to envision a 4-acre site that has very limited access today. I mean, right now, the site is only going to get one access, and it'll be full movement until DOT changes it. We know DOT's long-range plans contemplate the construction of a median in Center Street that will result in a right in, right out. And so it's hard to envision that this 4-acre site could develop for much more than really the non-residential that we're planning as part of this process. It's just not a large site for starters, so it's not like a situation where you'd be able to come in and do Class A office by any stretch of the imagination. And then the limited access really makes the non-residential uses constrained. The office users, the employment users, they're looking for signals, they're looking for easy access. This site will not have easy access in the long run. And so we don't think it's a site that realistically could develop for 4 meaningful acres of office. And again, we think the split that we've proposed is appropriate. And I recognize that as part of every zoning case that we review, right, there are trade-offs involved, inevitably. That's the nature of the zoning process, is what are our priorities? And sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's not. And even though this is just 4.1 acres, I recognize this is tricky. I never like to work on a zoning case that's inconsistent with the town's land use plan. I know the work that the town goes into, and I've had that conversation with my client early on, but we believe that the trade-off in this instance, being able to provide residential uses within a mile of downtown or within a mile of where we're standing currently, it's on a future bus route. during the affordability crisis that we're all experiencing, that everybody is as they come to this market, we think that is a trade-off that is worth it, recognizing that if we say no, if the decision is that we think the land use plan that is there makes sense, it's probably not going to be realized for a long time. And so we believe that what we have proposed with a combination of roughly 30 townhomes with an acre and a half of O&I is an appropriate blend. It provides for good transitions for the existing residential, along with the office zoning to our east. Investment Boulevard, which winds behind us, as you can see, has significant non-residential opportunities. We think by locating residential here, in addition to it being, kind of a better neighbor to the existing residential, also provides additional opportunities for people that would be working back in Investment Boulevard to be able to live close to where they work. And so with that, I just kind of wanted to explain a little bit of the rationale associated with how we've gotten to where we are, acknowledged fully head on that we are inconsistent with the land use plan for a portion of our request, and that's not something that we take lightly. But we do believe in this instance, this is one of those cases that we wanted to bring forward to you all, have you all deliberate and talk about it, because we think it's one of those, maybe take a second look, what does make sense, what doesn't make sense. And lastly, I would tell you, my client doesn't know why the land use map was changed to go from residential to non-residential. We don't know where that came from. It might have been part of the church's plans to expand. We don't know. It just, for what it's worth, the property that Mike and Mark have acquired kind of on the eastern portion of this site is property they bought from the church. At one point, the church had pretty significant expansion plans in this area and have dialed those back. So with that, we're here to answer any questions. If you've got kind of plan and transportation questions, I'll defer those to Mr. Roach, but we look forward to the dialogue and would respectfully request you all's recommendation of approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
A cul-de-sac is mentioned. I was wondering if there's a schematics plan, design plan?
Not as part of the zoning case. I mean, we've been working on a layout for an extended period of time, and so we have a pretty good idea. It's not a terribly large site, and we know there's only going to be one point of access. And so again, if you could kind of follow the cursor, we don't have, it's not incorporated into the zoning because this is a straight conditional use zoning case, but the plan for the access is going to wind the road kind of southerly. Adjacent to this eastern border, we're going to be providing cross access to the east for potential future connection to that site. And then the cul-de-sac is kind of wind to the west and then back up to the north. And where the cul-de-sac will be kind of right along the northwestern portion of the site.
And do we have an idea of how much length we're exceeding?
You know the answer to that?
Less than 600 feet is what I'm shooting for.
You're shooting for less than
Trying
600?
to keep it under 600 feet.
Okay.
When we put the condition in there, just.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Jason, I do have a few questions. So it looks like to the west, the Groves Townhomes that back up on the western property line, they did do a full right-of-way dedication on Center Street for the ultimate section. And then similarly, Calvary on the east side did dedication. So it would be, and I think it was in one of the zoning conditions that the right-of-way was going to be dedicated along the frontage as well as the street improvement. Does that mean that the asphalt will be made consistent with, as you drive down Center Street headed east, I guess, eastbound?
So we know at a minimum, we have to dedicate right-of-way consistent with the town's adopted transportation plan. That cannot change as part of this process because that's what North Carolina law provides. You've got an adopted transportation plan. When you go to site and subdivision, town has the right to require that dedication, and that dedication happens as a matter of law. So at a minimum, it will be consistent with the town's adopted comprehensive transportation plan, which is consistent with what you're talking about. What we've worked on with the staff relative to what DOT's been working on for a long time now, what we've worked on is essentially a provision that contemplates the possibility that if we beat DOT to the front door of moving forward on this, which we fully anticipate we will, because I don't think DOT is going to be moving forward on this project anytime soon from a right-of-way standpoint, that we will be dedicating right-of-way consistent with DOT's plans as well. It won't shrink the right-of-way. We have to dedicate at least as much consistent with the town's comprehensive transportation plan, but there may be additional right-of-way. And one of the things that we don't know is right now we know what the plan currently says. We don't know where that plan is going to be in a year 2 years, so it could change. And so what we've done is we've worded it in a way that makes sure that whatever that plan is, when we go in to do subdivision, we're going to be dedicating with that plan.
The buffer reduction, in the event that DOT project comes through and forces a reduction, the minimum is 20 feet. The normal width would have been 30, is that correct?
30.
And I just quickly looked across the street at the Groves. They actually predate where you couldn't have the buffer located. They actually do have it on the lots, and they're only 15 feet, which then kind of my mind's going, okay, you have a corridor down Center Street where you have front-loaded townhomes, and then on this side we would have, you know, something similar if you know, council approves this zoning. Would that also be kind of a similar townhome like on both sides of Center Street, or are you going to flip it and have rear loaded? I guess where I'm trying to imagine what the corridor is going to look like.
Gotcha. And Jeff, I don't know if you want to address how the layout is. And just for clarification, the minimum width that we have is 15 feet, Mr. Akers. Yeah.
Jeff Roach, Peak Engineering and Design. Mr. Akers, great question. The concept is to bring the cul-de-sac up, and you can actually see the concept, the cul-de-sacs. If you look, and I apologize, give me 1 second because it's a really good. If you see how the old Grove Lane townhome, you see the side of this location right here, Mr. Akers? Our goal is to have the cul-de-sac here, and you'll see the side of these townhomes. And there's actually a commitment in there that we've agreed to, that the side of any of our units that face Center Street will actually have either a wraparound porch or some sort of side entry architectural standards that'll make it look nice. It won't match what's across where you have the front entry, rear entry type product. We don't have this proposed. All of ours will look like they're internally served. Does that answer your question? Yep. Okay. And hopefully that answers Sarah's question as well about where the cul-de-sac's going.
You did, thank you.
Okay.
Do we have additional questions?
Just one final one. One of the conditions about the TA was 1,000 daily or 100 peak hour. Do we have a rough guesstimate of number of residential units that would trigger that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the number of residential units would be like more than 100 townhomes. I think it's like 120, something on that ballpark, to hit it on the residential alone. The question is the commercial. We just won't know until we get to time of site plan.
I can almost guarantee you, Mr. Akers, we can't get enough square footage of commercial to go with the say 29 or 30 residential to ever trigger 100 peak hours or 1,000 daily. I don't anticipate a TIA being required.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Additional questions?
Great, we're not going anywhere. We'll be here if you change your mind.
Thank
Thanks.
you so much. And I'll now open the public hearing for anybody wishing to speak on the Center City townhome rezoning. Do you have anybody signed up?
Just the applicants.
Okay, very good.
And we did not receive any emails
Okay, thank you.
since the new.
Thank you. All right, with that, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the full board for discussion.
I might have missed this, but what's the current existing zoning for the Groves 2 and the Groves?
Plan unit development conditional zoning and plan unit development conditional use.
Thank you.
And is the only reason that the town is for, because of the 2045 land use map, is that the only reason that the staff is opposed? As of now, is that the only reason? Is that what I understood?
And potential future restriction of access as well. So the main is the 2045 land use map, but it also supports with the transportation as well.
Yeah. But the future access issue is going to be the case either way. If so, we're really back to just the 2045 land use, pretty much. I mean, there's
Kind of, they go together as well.
Yeah.
Because with the land use map being office employment, it obviously with the land use map, there was not transportation related thought based off, residential and the future of that, so.
Yeah, just to clarify, because it was brought up earlier, one of the primary reasons staff recommended the change from high-density residential to office employment in association with the Advanced Apex process was because we knew about the state's future plans for Center Street and was looking at whether it would be an ideal location for residential given the access restraints, and recognizing that cross-access through the properties to the non-residential properties to the east to investment would be necessary, or U-turns in order to make that westbound movement. And so we looked at this as an opportunity to have to expand the non-residential uses that were to the east and extend it to the west.
Okay, thank you.
So something I heard that has not been named to your question, and Lauren, I'd love if you would weigh in on this. Something I haven't heard named is the interconnectedness we drive for. So not only on restriction, but creating an additional cul-de-sac would not lead towards the town's desire for interconnectedness. So therefore, creating an additional barrier there. But Lauren, I'd love for you to correct that if I have that wrong.
Correct. I know when we were reviewing this rezoning, we did have a discussion with if this property was proposed for residential at some point when the Groves did come in, there would have been a stub or some kind of connection maybe discussed or talked about or shown. So with the fact that there isn't something shown right now with that site plan or subdivision plan, then there's a potential that that was never the point for those properties. But I can't speak fully to that since I wasn't the planner of that, but that was part of the discussion when we were relating it with the current planning manager and the planning director. So Amanda could probably weigh in a little bit more on that.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, all I could say, I wasn't here when that subdivision was designed. And so why there was not a stub to the east, I can't answer that question. What I can say is that whether this is assembled as a mix of residential and office or all office, most likely there's going to be a restriction on access in which there'd be cross-access or shared access through non-residential parking lots or through a cul-de-sac for townhome lots, because the goal is to restrict the number of points of access on a major thoroughfare.
Thank you.
Lauren, is the property on the furthest property on the east on this assemblage that is staying office, or is it all going to residential?
On this one, it is staying, yeah.
So across from Myrtle Grove Lane retains. So where I was going with that is, I mean, regardless, you're still going to have an office use, so you're transitioning residential to an office and then office on the other side.
Correct. See this blue line is the boundary of the office and then high density. So this is kind of where the zoning district would end if with the legal description meets and bounds. So that would be the hard line.
Lauren, you had mentioned during your presentation that there was an initial neighborhood meeting, right? And then there was a second?
Yes, sir.
Can you provide details on both of those meetings, the turnout and comments that might have been mentioned?
Sure, I'll do my best ability. So the first neighborhood meeting was in November 30th, 2022, and that was when the first rezoning was submitted. So typically we require a neighborhood meeting prior to the submittal of the rezoning application, the petition. And if I recall, there was a lot of folks at that meeting, and we did receive. I can help you with that too. Okay. Since I was at all of them. We did receive quite a few public comments with that, a little bit of opposition with the traffic and concerns regarding that. And then when they were continued, they had another neighborhood meeting because we did require them to go through the neighborhood meeting process again prior to the submittal of the application with the 1328 Center Street. And that was on November 3rd, 2023. And it wasn't, based on my recollection of it, and that is also in the packet, and the applicants can speak toward that as well. It wasn't as busy as the last one. There was not as much of a turnout, but there was a little bit more interest, as in, oh, you're also including 1328. That's nice, kind of, it seemed like. And then the last neighborhood meeting was February 15th, 2024. And so typically, now that we have a new rezoning process, we require rezonings to go twice. The first time before they come in, and then the second time prior to planning board. And that's kind of to let the neighbors know any changes or any new zoning conditions or any changes to the uses or things that staff may require. They can just update the neighbors, and we always require them to do a new 300-foot buffer notice as well. So if there's any new property owners included in that, then they would be aware of that the first time. So that's just kind of where that is. So it was just an update to that.
Okay.
So I'm sure Jeff can provide more detail, since they do hold those meetings, and they are required by notary to provide those questions and answers and of that too. So
Yeah.
And Jeff, before
Oh,
you
yeah,
answer,
sorry.
I'm sorry. No, please. Before
sorry, I just wanted to reference that.
Before you answer, I want folks to know that it is in the staff packet, and so for folks watching, if you open the agenda in the staff packet, you will see all of the comments that were included.
It is a big packet.
It is a big packet.
So it's
several hundred pages.
It is part of the
Not this one, but-
it is part of the application. So it will be kind of after this, the affidavit, the legal description. So it's kind of at the last few pages of the application.
Thank you.
At least on mine.
Yep.
And Lauren's right. We had 3 neighborhood meetings because we restarted the process, and the ordinance changed, the UDO changed between our initial submittal a year and a half ago, or whenever it was, and today. I don't remember there being a lot of opposition even at the first one. It was more about questions, what's going on. And people were gathering a lot of information about what was going on with the Center Street widening plan from DOT, and they were questioning that more than anything. Our last meeting that we had last month, we had one member attend, one neighbor who was across the street, and he was very excited for the project. Personally, he's a member of the board, so he was speaking personally, saying, I like what you guys are doing. I'm glad you picked up what we'll call the donut hole, and we're able to bring the last piece into the mix. So just to clarify. All right.
Thank you, Jeff.
All right, well, thank you, Lauren. Additional discussion, items for discussion? So I will name that I appreciate addressing the fact that that we don't come lightly before the board for a change to the land use map. Because the land use map is that, and it does get changed, and I have it on my phone and have had several versions as it gets changed, because it is important, and I'm not a planner, just a resident, to stay on top of when things are changing in the community. I personally don't see the value with changing, because I think when you're changing, I want to see, when you're going about changing the land use map, for me, I want to see a strong contribution to the community. And considering we are always trying to attract more businesses, we've kind of gone through what some of these challenges are going to be for these particular lots. I'm not in favor of limiting potential opportunities for businesses. I mean, this is directly located behind Investment Boulevard. It seems like a great spot sort of in this area for additional businesses to potentially come versus other areas. And if we start siphoning pieces off, even though this is office and industrial and residential, we start siphoning pieces off, soon we're going to be back to, can we get this rezoned for just residential, would be my concern. There are other opportunities I could see where I would change my mind, say if this were a Habitat location, or other, full, every residential unit that was coming up was all affordable. housing, I think that I could see that being a great benefit, but for me, I have concerns around, just changing land use map. We're talking 2.5 acres, that's 2.5 acres, but it's also, in the middle of, right near, less than a mile from here, and, that's 2.5 acres that someone else is gonna wanna have changed, 200 acres. If we make an exception for one, I realize that we do that as a board, but that's where that, a very slippery slope starts. So I would not be in favor, but I'm curious as to what the rest of the board is sitting.
I'll follow up that. On the contrary, I think I am in favor because of some of the merits that it does bring. I think the applicant hit on something very passionate that I believe in, which is we have a substantial housing shortage in this area. And to go with a smaller attached product that's campus style parking, I think it's going to hit a naturally lower price point. I'm not going to use the affordable housing. It's more attainable than other housing that we've seen come across this board. It's a good transitional idea, and I like how the applicant is keeping the office use on the end. So when you come in across Myrtle Grove, that's your entrance point, and you have a decision to either head straight or left, potentially if there's an interconnect to the Calvary site, which I think is also office commercial. But if you go to the right when you come in, it would be residential, and that's in keeping with two uses on the cardinal directions that are already developed. I think it's in keeping with that area. To the south, I think in the staff report, it said that there's a potential for redevelopment and that it could be incongruent or cause friction with another type of industrial use. But I don't know that really an existing developed self-storage is going to redevelop into something else in the near future. And we have an applicant that's looking to put a needed housing shortage potential solution at this little 2.5 acres to produce 30 units. I think that's a bigger win to the town of Apex, in my opinion, right now. Plus, we get the Center Street gap filled in with right-of-way and street improvements. So, I drive both my boys use Excel Sports, and we do on Saturday mornings. We go over there and do football, indoor football, and you feel it when you go by. It's like a gap. So I'd like to see it filled in, and now's the time. So I am in favor of it.
I'll tack on to that. When I first looked at this, I was kind of like, I don't know, because, you have the residential over here, and you have the office, and then you have to kind of drive all the way through to get to your residential, and, it just seemed a little bit, different. But I think that's just a personal perception, for sure. And then the more I think about it, I think about, traffic's crazy. There's benefits here because you have people living and they could potentially work, visit. There's not a whole lot of office over there from my memory. So there's some benefit there. To the west, you're not going to get a connection anytime soon. Same with the south, I don't think. So regardless of what develops here, you're going to have a problem in terms of that connectivity. And I think we should be embracing more developments that are similar to this, where you have, residential and, work adjacent to each other, less car trips. I'm kind of in favor of it as well.
I'll concur with both of those, and for a lot of good reasons. I think the site has limitations, and it has the access restriction either way. That's not going to go away if we leave it all office, and not to mention where the office environment is right now but the main reason is they've done a really good job. The access restriction is going to be an access restriction. Either way we go, there's always going to be access restriction with this lot. Unfortunately, there's not a stub to the east. We're not sure how that, so the only way I know people had the access issue with the cul-de-sac, but again, that's going to be the case no matter what with the restrictions of the lot. And they've done a real good job. And I'm not going to call it affordable housing, but let's be honest, those townhomes without a garage, and I realize there's only 29 or 30 of them, but doesn't meet the term affordable housing. But for Apex, it's going to be a less affordable housing than we have on the market now. We don't have that. It's on the bus route, and the sidewalk and improvements along Center Street. And they still have the office environment on the lot all the way to the west, which is not entirely taking it out. So for that and various reasons, I would also be in support of approval.
This is a tough one. I see it going both ways. I was curious also with the home that's being treated as a business that's there now, you know, if that were to be acquired, how would that change the picture? How would that change what people's perception is? You know, right now there's that kind of that home right there in the center.
I feel like it mentioned in the report that it's getting relocated.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not part.
That was a donut hole that was originally in the rezoning. Mr. Roy,
Okay.
that got picked up and that's part of the zoning package. So there is no gap in the middle.
I see.
That's the change. And if you scroll through, it's at the
That's
very
the other
bottom.
change. Okay,
Sorry.
thank you for the correction. I appreciate that. The other concern that I have is with lining up the road with Myrtle to the north. And what is that going to do as far as the site for the commercial that's there? Because you're kind of like cutting directly right into, I mean, I'm just trying to, what's the viable solution for any business that's there other than, I mean, you're pretty much taking your road and going right where you would, where you have your commercial zoning. I mean, I'd like to look at the map again. It's just kind of looking at the maps, looking at iMaps and looking at the county maps.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a great one to look at.
As you can see what I'm looking at here, trying to come across this thing. You're gonna go right into right where, you see what I mean?
Yeah. So
It's just tough to conceptualize a road coming right across there and still having a commercial site that's viable for anything.
So, not to make it a condition of the zoning, but the layouts that we have show the road coming directly across from Myrtle Grove, making a little bit, and I'm going to try to trace it here with the cursor. I don't know if you guys can see this well, but the road will come down, will make a slight bend and parallel the property line, and then it will stub to the east so that in the future, when this parcel develops, there will be a possibility to extend across what is now the church's parking lot, okay? The other idea is, the next step is that this building right here is the current building that was originally the donut hole. That building is proposed to be picked up and moved east to this location right here. They will then have a small parking lot behind them, which is what the ordinance really wants, is parking behind the building. So you'll have a new building, new small commercial, and that building's only like 1,200 square feet. We're not talking about a 10,000 square foot office building. It'll never fit. It's too small. So that's why we established the zoning line is about right here, coming down between the residential to the west, to the left of the screen, and the O&I to the right. The townhomes will then be isolated in this area. That's why picking up this piece that was the original donut hole was so important, because it allowed us to move the building over to the east, get it out of the way, have the 27 to 30 townhomes on the west, and the town and the office commercial component would be right there near the entrance. His driveway will be located in the back because DOT doesn't want us to have a driveway right next to Center Street. So his driveway to get out will be a little bit down. It'll be down in this area down here, Mr. Royal. So, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ms. Sherman. No, you were going to ask a question.
I was gonna cut you off, so continue.
Okay, fair enough. So that's kind of the idea. So it does hold the zoning that's currently O&I on this large piece here, and it takes a little sliver here and converts it to O&I in this area right here. So that's kind of your O&I. That 1.5 acres over here is your O&I piece. It's not like I said, it's not a 10,000 square foot office building being proposed. It's truly relocation of the existing house over there, having them clean up that house and get them more into compliance with the ordinance. That's really the goal for them. Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Roach.
Now I'm done, Ms. Sherman.
Thank you. I do want to name that we have closed the public hearing.
Yes.
So I wanted to caution that and continue to have conversation here amongst the board. And I don't know if we have all questions answered, but just want to name we were in discussion. So I don't know if there's any more discussion or a possible motion.
I'll go with a motion to approve.
All right. Is there a second?
No second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No? Okay, that passes. Y'all, I can't do math. 6-1? 7-1? All right. Thank you. We will move on to public hearing item number 2. That is with June. Public hearing and possible motion regarding rezoning case 23CZ21 Castleberry Reserve PUD.
Good afternoon, June Cowles with the Planning Department. This is Castleberry Reserve PUD Plan Unit Development Amendment. So the site is located in the northwest section of town. The project site is located south of Castleberry Road, Lake Castleberry subdivisions here, single family home, and Clure Vineyards is also to the north of Castleberry. Castleberry Estates, the project site is located to the west. Wimberley Road, right here is the protected open space, and that runs along the south as well. And then on the other side is single family residential homes. So the current zoning district is planned unit development conditional zoning. And then this portion is, I'm going to refer that in your staff report as a Johnson parcel. And so it's Wake County residential 80 is the current zoning. And so the reason for this plan unit development conditional zoning amendment is to add this 13.86 acre parcel to the Castleberry Reserve PUD plan. And so that's what's proposed is plan unit development conditional zoning. The 2045 land use map shows low density for Castleberry Reserve project site, and then that would be the residential, rural density residential is on the 2045 land use plan. So if the properties are rezoned as proposed, the 2045 land use map would automatically be amended to low density residential for that Johnson parcel. So when the Castleberry Reserve was approved by council in September 2023, planning board, it came up in July. And so there were amendments that you guys didn't get to see that happened at town council. They reduced the maximum density to 1.65 units per acre. And they included the 450-foot buffer adjacent to this protected open space area. Preserved the 25% existing tree canopy. They increased the Castleberry Road streetscape buffer to 40 feet. They increased the Northern District minimum lot size to 8,000 square feet, and the lot width to 60 feet. Increased the corner side yard setback to 10 feet for both districts. This is the Northern and the Southern District. And then they also increased solar commitments for 20 homes. They included a condition limiting the width of the garages to no more than 50%. And then they also included a donation of $148,000 to the Town of Apex Affordable Housing Fund. So that was $1,000 per unit. On the original one that you saw was they were providing 2 affordable homes. And then their off-site improvements, they were upgrading the existing American Tobacco Trail and the Wimberley Road crossing with high visibility crosswalk markings and signs. They're going to extend that sidewalk to this location and install a push button rapid flashing crosswalk beacon system. Also, there was that question about when we saw it at planning board about the Castleberry Road widening, what we wanted that to look like. In town council, they approved keeping that existing rural character of Castleberry Road with that grass swale and then the 5-foot sidewalk south of the grass swale. At town council, the applicant added to construct a 5-foot wide off-site sidewalk along this adjacent, so this is not part of the Castleberry Reserve, but it would be off-site. So they would extend it, so it would be right across from Lake Castleberry subdivision. So potentially people could walk and then get down to the tobacco trail. If they can't attain that off-site right away, they agreed to a fee in lieu for the cost of that sidewalk. So the existing conditions, and I put that Johnson parcel in red, is they have mature trees, single-family home is located there with some outbuildings, and then a field area along here, and a floodplain is on the eastern side of the property line. This is the proposed pub plan site layout with the Johnson parcel, and they would be having the open space buffer and then the southern district, which would have the minimum 10,000 square foot lot. So what the proposed pub plan amendment for the Johnson parcel, including it, increases the acreage from 89.9 acres to 103 acres, increases the number of single-family units from 148 to 170, and that would still keep that maximum density at 1.65. They are providing the 450-foot wide buffer along the southern property line, and then on the eastern side, there would be a 200-foot, variable 250-foot wide buffer. And that goes to about 300 feet. And then, of course, it picks up that southern buffer, so it would be larger. They also are increasing the donation to $170,000, $1,000 per unit at 170 units. And so they conducted 2 neighborhood meetings, October 24th, 2023, and February 19th, 2024, and the meeting reports are attached to your staff report. The letter of impact from Wake County Public School System was received for this rezoning amendment, and that's included in your staff report packet. They stated that elementary, middle, and high schools within the current assignment area for this rezoning development are anticipated to have insufficient capacity for future students. Transportation to schools outside of the current assignment should be anticipated. And then school expansion or construction within the next 5 years may address concerns at the middle school grade level. The Environmental Advisory Board, they reviewed the proposed amendment on November 16, 2023, and they recommended the conditions that were approved with the original Castleberry Reserve PUD rezone. But they also recommended a couple of recommendations, add another PET station to the project, and that the applicant has provided. It went from 4 to 5. And then the next 2 recommendations the applicant did not add, and that was the 220, 240 outlets installed in the garages for electrical vehicles, and then provide a variety of native species, trees and shrubs within the, there's some unforested area in this section of the 450-foot buffer. The Parks, Recreation, and Resource Advisory Commission reviewed the amendment on January 31st, 2024, and they recommended a fee in lieu. So just to show the aerial of Johnson parcel, you could see it sort of, I call it the bald area. So it doesn't have, I guess they farmed this area, but it is included in the 450-foot buffer from the protected open space. And then you can see the floodplain along here. And then the aerial shows the whole PUD plan if the Johnson parcel was included. And so the 450-foot wide game land buffer along the southern property line is justified for the following reason that is consistent with the Castleberry Reserve Pub Plan properties to the west. And it's along this non-fragmented open space area. So the variable 250-foot wide game land buffer along the eastern property line is justified along this area that you can see in the aerial. There's some topography right here. So it's 30 feet. That's a 30 feet embankment that goes up to the end of the 250-foot line. And then there's a single family home here, and actually it's better right here. Right here, and here's another single family home. The American Tobacco Trail runs along this side, and then of course Wimberley Road. So this area is starting to be fragmented open space. And then we also, the project 250-foot buffer follows this tree line area. Here's the trees along here. And the proposed Johnson parcel, this whole game land area encompasses approximately 60% of this parcel. And just to, this is what the single family homes conceptual building elevations that were included with the Castleberry Reserve Pub Plan. It's the same for the Johnson parcel. And our staff recommends approval of the Castleberry Reserve PUD Plan Amendment rezone. While it's not consistent with the current rural density residential classification for the Johnson parcel, on the 2045 land use map, staff is able to support the rezoning for the following reasons. And it is reasonable and in the public interest that the Johnson parcel includes 450-foot wide buffer along the southern property line, adjacent to the protected open space. It is consistent with the approved Castleberry Reserve, and it includes a variable 250-foot wide buffer along the eastern property, adjacent to the protected open space. And that Johnson parcel, all approved PUD plan uses and development standards would apply to this additional parcel. Staff did receive, and I believe you also received, an email from Jim Wall, and this afternoon we received an email from Mr. Reynolds. And happy to answer any of your questions, and then the applicant also has a presentation.
Thank you, June. Any questions for June?
For those emails that were received, can you pinpoint the location of those properties on the map in relation to the Johnson parcel?
I know Mr. Reynolds' property is right here. And Mr. Wall, where was Mr. Wall's? Was it along here?
I believe the parcel you just pointed out is Mr. Wall's, and then Mr. Reynolds is next to that.
Oh,
To the north.
yeah, Mr. Reynolds is this one, and then I think Mr. Wall's is that one.
I know they're adjacent.
Well, they're adjacent to it, so they're both right here. And I can go on the aerial. There we go. Here and here.
Thank you.
June, I do have and again, I know we already heard this case before, so I don't want to open it back up, but how many points of access for 100 and currently as proposed 148, soon to be, if approved, 170, where are the access points that are actually going to get constructed with this project?
Here on Castleberry Road, and then they would need to stub in with Wimberley Oaks Drive.
So I saw, that's where I was just honing in. So Wimberley Oaks Drive is paper right away to the property line. It looks like Diesel Path is a private road, and then it kind of dog legs down into Serenity Trail, which this property that's part of this amendment is part of. That paper right away, does that then become an extension of Wimberley Oaks, and then this project would connecting to that as like a usable second point.
So Wimberley, they would stub in and continue Wimberley Road down and then come across here. And then within the subdivision, you know, come off of that road.
And I'm a little rusty on the number of units off 2 points of access, but 170 is okay.
Yes.
Under the ordinance, okay.
And of course, they have stub streets on this side as well. They have a stub street, but not a connection. It's
Right.
just stub right in there.
Do we have any additional questions for June? Thank you, June. The applicant would like to speak?
Good evening, Chair Sherman and members of the board. Matthew Carpenter with Parker Poe, 301 Fayetteville Street. Here this evening on behalf of the developer. Also with me tonight is Patty Harrell-Hilburn with McKim & Creed, and Patty's our civil engineer. As June mentioned, this project was approved by council in September of last year after several significant changes. I think June did a great job of explaining those. But the very narrow focus of this PUD amendment is to add the Johnson property. And so the way that kind of came about was, you know, the developer had been working throughout the previous rezoning case to try to acquire that property because it really makes for just a much more developable site as opposed to leaving it sort of at the bottom corner. And so did get that property under control pretty late in the rezoning process, you know, right around the time of the council meeting. And so it didn't leave time to add it to the case and to get a decision on that. And so what we did is we went ahead with the PUD amendment, not knowing if the Johnson property would be part of it. And then we came back for this PUD amendment. And so the Johnson property takes the total acreage to 103.42 acres. As June mentioned, it is mostly open space. There aren't a ton of trees on the property, but there are some sort of in that northeastern corner there. And so, you know, the neighboring uses obviously haven't changed. We've got Lake Castleberry to our north, the Castleberry Estates subdivision, and then the permanently protected open space. And so again, just to sort of summarize the changes in this PUD amendment in just a few bullet points, it increases the total acreage, it increases the single family units by 22 from 148 to 170 by virtue of the additional acreage. It doesn't change the per acre density. And then we've increased the affordable donation to accommodate those additional units. We are preserving the existing tree canopy that's on the Johnson property in that buffer adjacent to the game lands. And then, as I mentioned before, it's just a much more comprehensive site with the addition of the Johnson property. There are topography and sewer issues with developing that property separately. And so, you know, it's uncertain what would have happened to it if it weren't part of this case, as it sort of sits there at the bottom of our site adjacent without great access. And so, as June mentioned, we're not changing the conditions that were approved as part of the PUD. So there were a lot of commitments that came in sort of late in the game, and those will not be changed. The density won't change, the max built upon area standard, the cemetery preserved in place, the American Tobacco Trail connection, the sidewalk gap on Castleberry Road, the density transition that we tried to implement with the two different districts, the game land buffer, the preservation of tree canopy, and then we had the two affordable units. They're at 135% AMI, so they're more so, I guess, workforce type housing units. We have those in addition to the affordable donation. And then we've gotten a lot of comments about the access road location from neighbors. And so I wanted to just go ahead and address that. We've spent a lot of time discussing and trying to get the access right. Previously, we had it just a little bit to the east on your screen. I think it was right here. And the concern there was that there was no vegetation on the north side of the road, and so cars turning right would have shined their lights directly into Mr. Renfre's home here. And so we looked at, well, could we shift it? And so we shifted it slightly to the left of your screen because that's where the wooded area is. And if we were to shift it further left, then we'd be directly in the rear of the existing homes in Lake Castleberry. And then if we moved it back to where it is to the east, back to where it was to the east, then we're shining directly into the front door of Mr. Renfre's house. And so we spent a lot of time trying to tweak that to get it right. We also think that the majority of traffic, well, we know the majority of traffic will be turning right out of this intersection because Castleberry Road dead ends at the end near the Chatham County line. And then just to sort of put a point on that, this is a picture of the vegetation across from the entrance. Obviously, it looks like this was taken during the summer, and so it will be a thinner buffer in the winter when some of those leaves fall. But just to give you an idea of why we placed it where we did, because it would be right across from the existing tree cover. And then with the access road, I said we spent a lot of time on it. We also spent a lot of time on the buffer along the eastern boundary of the Johnson property. And so I know June mentioned the topo, and I thought that might be a question. And so I've included the topography of the Johnson property here. You can see that it does drop over 30 feet from the edge of the tree line there to the property line with the open space. And so you can see the existing tree cover is generally here in green, and then our buffer is shown in the crosshatched area. And so the goal there was to meet the safety concerns of the 450-foot buffer that we had along the southern site boundary, and also preserve the existing tree cover, which generally follows this dashed line here. And so we think we're comfortable in working with staff and looking at the topo and the buffer that there won't be any safety issues with hunting, and that will preserve the existing tree cover and not negatively impact the floodplain area. So with those changes, again, we believe it's a much better site design, just with the additional acreage and bringing that property in. I know before I finish, Mr. Akers, I'll answer your question on access. So as part of the project, the developer is acquiring the property where the easement is now, which is just over the edge of the property adjacent to the east. And so that street will follow the existing easement that's there now, and that'll be dedicated as public right-of-way. So that'll be a full public road that connects to the existing Wimberley Oaks Drive cul-de-sac. So we will have 2 access points, and that's part of the subdivision plan review that is going on now. So and so with the changes, we believe the changes are positive, and in the spirit of the case that was approved in September, and we respectfully ask for your approval.
Thank you so much. Do we have any questions for the applicant?
Matt, the access point, I saw the neighborhood list of back and forth on this, so I told them at least I'd ask the question, but
right.
That access point shown in the arrow right there, is that what was approved on the original zoning? And if you were to shift it slightly, is that a violation of the zoning because access points shift?
No, and staff can comment too, but in the past when we have these sort of conceptual access locations on the concept plan, they can shift slightly, left or right when we have more engineering data at subdivision plan. And that was the case here too. The cemetery that we're preserving that's on the site is, I think, in this general area. And so that also dictated the driveway location, because if we had shifted it to the right on the screen here, it would have been teeing with the cemetery, which wouldn't have been ideal from a circulation standpoint, or just having people drive directly at the cemetery.
Again, I don't like getting into site plan discussion because that's not what this board does anymore. That's through staff administratively, but it is public record, and the neighbors did pull it up. The directness of that road heading off of Castleberry, which kudos to the original zoning, there is a speed limit that is now put up on Castleberry Road at 45 miles an hour. Some might contest that's still too fast. But looking at the directness of the route through that subdivision now, I truly do believe that that's also going to be a racetrack used by those future neighbors. I do like the idea of disconnecting that road to slow people as they come into Castleberry. I would love if somebody could look at that. I looked at it again, it's not my project, but as an engineer, I took a quick look and it could happen. It would check a lot of boxes for the neighbors. But
yeah, we can certainly look at that. I think and Patty can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think so far we plan to do that with stop signs. So either have a four-way stop sign or a small traffic circle. I know that's been discussed too. I'm not sure what the latest plans show, but yeah.
Where would that be? A traffic circle? Can you pinpoint where the traffic circle might be?
Can you?
Well, there's many, actually. My name is Patty Harold Hilburn with McKimmon Creed Engineers.
Right there, maybe?
There's a few, actually. I think there's like 3 or 4 intersections where we have the small mini circles for traffic calming.
I'm very concerned with this Castleberry Road speed limit. I think it was like 2 weeks ago, they posted up new signs. It was a sign that said, no outlet when you entered the street. And then right behind it, 2 feet behind it, it says 45 miles per hour. And the road has no painted lines, no sidewalks. And I see residents run and walk all the time. And that road being a no outlet 45 miles per hour, I'm concerned now. I'm concerned even more with 170 units coming in and having only 2 access points. I know Lake Castleberry is a lot less houses than 170, and they have 3 access points. Is that right? Something like that, 3 access points. So I'm not opposed to the development, but I'm just concerned with the speed limit and how much traffic it's gonna bring.
Right, understood. The no outlet obviously is to the west.
Yeah, it's not like a long street.
Right,
so.
right, exactly. And so anybody coming out of this, we would assume that they're going to be turning right, towards Wimberley. And it's pretty short, roadway itself to get to that intersection. Again, we do have, these are really the access points, the one here, and then the one connecting to Wimberley Oaks. I think June mentioned that we do have a stub here for when and if this does get developed, then, it would tie into across from the development across the street as well. I can't speak on the speed limit,
Yeah,
but
can I jump in, Patty?
yeah, sure.
So, and if I misspeak, I know Mr. Akers remembers, but I think before the previous zoning case, there was no speed limit at all on Castleberry, which defaults to maybe 55. And so we started conversations in the previous case with DOT to try to reduce that speed limit. And so that's part of the reason the signs have been posted now is it actually reduced the speed limit from 55 to 45, which is sort of unbelievable. But and so I think, there are ongoing conversations we can have with DOT to reduce that further because they were open to doing that, when we first spoke with them. So we've been working to try to reduce speeds because I know it is a dead end street and it's a very narrow. So
the drawings that are currently filed, would that be revised to include the Johnson parcel?
So we've included the Johnson parcel now. We talked to staff, and staff has allowed us to sort of pursue the two plans concurrently, obviously with the understanding that, you know, if the PUD amendment's not approved, we have to remove it from the subdivision. So the Johnson property is included now in the master subdivision plan submittal.
Is there a happy medium where we could adjust the plan to accommodate the two emails that we received?
Well, the way that began is that, you know, Mr. Renfer, who lives directly to the north of us, asked us to adjust the plan so it wasn't shining directly into his house. So that's why we initially moved the driveway. And then obviously when, you know, we heard from the folks that live in Lake Castleberry, and so we looked at shifting it again, but its current location is really the best location with the fewest impacts on anyone. We know, you know, not everyone's going to be happy with it because, you know, we do have to have an access road, but there are trees there between, you know, our access and the rear of their homes. And it keeps from having the street lined up directly across from Mr. Renfer's house where there's no vegetation at all in front of his house. So, you know, I think we are already sort of at a unhappy median, I guess.
And the cemetery.
Right, right.
I'm curious to know how you incorporate the cemetery in the design. Because isn't it historical, right?
It is, yeah. And so you're welcome to, I don't have the subdivision plan on the slide here because it's for the PUD amendment, but you're welcome to pull those and take a look.
So are you saying the house, the single detached house right across the street, is that, like, what's the distance? Like, it looks like a pretty big distance where maybe it is doable. The shifting is doable.
Yeah, so we had the driveway here, and when, you know, folks are turning right, because that's the main movement, it would have, you know, lights would have been going directly into the front of his home rather than the rear, which I do think makes a difference. And so we shifted it. I think there was a challenge, and Patty can add to this, but there was some challenge for locating it, you know, a few feet to the right. It was sort of either here or here. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, and honestly, I can't remember exactly why we moved it to this point, but there was some conflict that we needed to move it a little more west than keeping it towards the east.
And in its current location, as cars turn right, the trees here still catch, you know, most of the headlights coming out, and so that was the idea. Right.
Are those two existing roads right now? The wide one, the straight, like acute angled?
Here?
Yes.
No, I believe that's a gas easement.
Okay.
Or is that?
That's a road.
I think
The gas line is going
the gas
perpendicular.
line is north.
That's
Along
right.
that northern line.
Yeah, it's a little up the road, the gas line.
So that is a road?
The road is kind of parallel to the property line. It's gray, and then that's like a power line.
Here is
There's like a Duke Energy power line gap in the trees.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the power line easement. Yeah.
Yep.
Any additional questions?
I've got a question. This is changing gears from traffic and homes. But the purpose of the buffer was to make sure that, you know, there was a mitigation of risk, right?
Right. That's exactly right.
Essentially what it is. I'm just curious, how does the neighborhood plan to, you know, but the open space of the Johnson parcel? I mean, now you have where you could have access who could come right off of game lands and up into that area. Like, how do you plan to help mitigate that? Because right now it looks like that could be something where kids could go try to use that field. I'm not sure if HOA is going to try to manage that as a field, or if you're going to come back and plant tree canopy through there. Like, what's the...
Right. So we had a long discussion about that at the EAB meeting, and we went back and forth on whether we were going to try to decide exactly how to plan it right now or to wait on that. And what we decided to do was wait. But I do think it'll be owned and managed by the HOA, and it'll be planted to some extent. And the discussion became, well, to count the area as RCA, it takes very specific sort of rich plantings. And, we didn't know it's such a large area, we didn't know we'd be able to meet that standard. And so we went ahead and said, okay, well, we can find our RCA elsewhere on the site. It's still in the game lands buffer, but it won't count as our RCA, and it will be planted in some way, whether it's a meadow or it's with smaller sapling type trees. But the goal is to plant it to, like you mentioned, sort of mitigate people walking through it to the open space. And also we're relying on the topo there, which drops significantly off to the right of your screen. And then it drops to the south too. It sort of curves around and falls to the south. So
Could this area be possibly identified by the town as an area for tree preservation, as far as, where we have other neighborhoods that are tree canopies being removed, they have to identify a place where they can replant? Could this
yes, that's something we discussed too at
be an area where we
EAB.
do it?
Right, it could, and so we've left the door open for that. And so, and it also leaves some flexibility as to the type of trees that could go there that we didn't say this is going to be RCA. So, we're certainly open to partnering with those programs where tree relocation is parts of other projects.
And to build off that a little bit, you referenced getting the parcel under control.
Right.
Can you elaborate on what you meant by that?
Yeah.
Is this part of what you were meaning? I didn't know.
Under contract is basically, so a lot of these zoning cases that we bring, there's a developer and has assembled, acreage to develop, and will close on it, either sometimes before, sometimes after approval. And so we had sort of identified that property as being, it would be a good part of the project, but when when the developer initially reached out to the owner, they weren't interested in selling. And so that changed, throughout the sort of progression of the case. And so that was when, we obviously can't bring zoning cases for properties that the developers don't control. And so that was when we, made it a part of the case.
Can I caution you to maybe be a little more humble? Something I've actually asked you before when you're speaking about neighbors. Under control doesn't feel good. And so I don't want to talk about bringing our neighbors and landowners under control. I understand that you may have been in communication, you may have had conversation, may have gone longer than the original, but I think when we talk about under control, that gives me a reason for pause. I'm grateful that there was an agreement that was reached and the owner was agreeable to what options were being presented, but under control alludes to something entirely different, and I don't suspect that is what you meant.
No, I mean, interchangeable with under contract.
That's why I say to be cautious and humble with your words. Thank you. Do we have any additional comments for the applicant?
Can you show us the sidewalk connection to the American Tobacco Trail?
I can. I think June didn't you have that graphic in your presentation? I think I can find it. Remember seeing that? Let's see. There it is.
Will it be off of the Wimberley Road or?
Yes, it'll be along Wimberley. So if you see the dashed yellow line there, towards the top of that line, it connects to the existing sidewalk. And so we'll pick up where that sidewalk left and run it south to connect to the American Tobacco Trail crossing here.
And are there any other sidewalk planned?
Yeah, well, so there will be sidewalks throughout the project. And then the case also includes this off-site connection, which will connect, I need to zoom out here, to the Lake Castleberry sidewalk. So you can see Lake Castleberry didn't install sidewalks on the frontage of its property. And so what we're going to do is connect across from the existing sidewalk stub here, and then the portion in yellow is off our property. It's off-site.
So, and you're going to continue that to
Yes.
the end of the site?
Exactly.
The pipelines?
Right.
Okay.
And then the sidewalk will connect to our entrance, and then it'll run through our development to Wimberley Oaks, where the sidewalk is to get to the tobacco trail.
If there are no additional questions, we can open public hearing. All right, thank you so much,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Carpenter. All right, with that, I will open the public hearing for the Castleberry Reserve rezoning. Oh, okay. Thank you. All right, so if there's no one else to speak on the hearing, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for discussion and possible motion.
So is this for the whole 103 acres or just the Johnson?
Just the Johnson parcel.
It's technically a PUD amendment for the whole acreage so that it incorporates the Johnson parcel into the existing PUD.
Thank you.
It will include include the amendments from the town council approval.
But the Johnson PUD is the only, or the Johnson property is the only change to the PUD. Correct. Okay.
With the amendments that,
With the amendments from the
yeah, the
council.
450, right? The game buffer, 450,
Mhm.
and the buffers.
The amendments that Gene reviewed were already approved by town council on the existing PUD. And so those carry forward. And so it's the addition of the parcel plus an increase to the contribution to the Affordable Housing Fund. And there may be a couple other, I don't know if there were any other additions than that, Matthew.
I think they had more affordable housing too, in addition to the. That's right. In addition to.
They had the 2 units in the original, they increased the contribution, and then the provision of the game land buffer.
Go ahead, Mr. Akers. I was going, if I was going before or after you. I know you're the neighbor. You're right down the road.
I am. No, I think council did a really good job. We debated this a while because it's, as Mr. Sherman pointed out, this is at variance with the future land use plan, but all the concessions, it should be a very respectable community in addition to the communities that are all surrounding this already. The one thing, few things that really did kind of resonate with me, access points are huge out here. I mean, people treat Castleberry Road like, it's a drag strip. It's scary at times because we run, my whole family runs and uses that road and have for, better part of 12 years. But people are starting to slow down. There are speed limit signs, so I'm grateful for the community, the Castleberry Reserve PUD that kind of instituted the speed limit. I was encouraged, Mr. Carpenter, that you said that ongoing discussions with DOT, we can further those. I know that they rejected the 35 at the onset, but as more and more development, we want that friction. We want people to slow down. So hopefully that can continue. And that we will have 2 access points. I was worried that it was only the one off Castleberry, which, the council is really keen on access points and safety right now. So having the secondary access point directly over to Wimberley through the other subdivision is huge. Is it gravity? This is all gravity sewer to the pump station there, or I guess the Cary Regional Pump Station right down there. I mean, it's more of the same. I don't really have concerns. I know Mr. Carpenter and the folks at McKimmon Creek are working on the access point and have vetted that. I'd love to see further conversations with Mr. Rudy and some of the neighbors that are directly affected, because there might be an option to potentially shift it over and slow traffic. I'd love to see both of those, but I'm generally in favor otherwise.
I'll concur. I'll just say that I concur with that. As far as the Johnson Acres is at least roughly 60% all buffer right out of the gate. I mean, it's just added on, and well over half of it is buffer. And there was concerns about trees growing in that field. And if you do wait, any type of field in North Carolina left for 2-3 years, it's going to be full of Carolina pines. We knew it before they even get to think about it. There will be trees there. I mean, we all seen the pollen.
And the pollen.
It only takes 2 or 3 years, and we got a field full of pines. But with the increase to the affordable housing, number one, the increase to the housing itself, and then the contribution also, and a large part of this is is buffer, so I would also be in favor.
I agree with you. Having that Johnson parcel really helps. Keeping the greenery for the plant, for the town, that's awesome. I love how all the amendments have been worked in with town council. Speed limit is just ongoing concern, can't really do anything about it. Yeah, I would just love if we could work with the two neighbors, because, you know, they're existing, and if we could work and come to a happy medium, that would be great. Because I feel like for every case, we're always, you know, trying to listen more to locals and get their feedback on development, because, you know, it's going to be a development, right? And everyone has to work together and live together. Yeah.
Any additional comments or a motion?
In general, I'm in support as well. I do think if you can investigate the tree canopy as far as that buffer right now, if it's, I know we're gonna have the native North Carolina pine coming up on its own, but I think that could be something where the town, if possible, I'm not really sure the rules and regulations behind that, but that could be an opportunity to keep things right here. So with that, I'm in favor as well.
Is that a motion that we heard?
I thought I heard a motion.
Sure, yeah, I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve case 23CZ21 Castleberry Reserve PUD amendment.
All those in favor, say aye.
Do we have a second?
Oh, I'm sorry, thank you. Can I get a second, please?
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes unanimously, thank you. All right, item number 3 is,
Sure, I have to recuse myself for the next case.
yes, and so is Alyssa.
Oh.
All right, so,
Do we need to make a motion for
do I need to make a motion before we open?
Yes.
All right, can I have a motion to recuse Alyssa and Ryan?
I'll make the motion to recuse Ryan and Alyssa.
Can I get a second? Thank you.
Tim,
All-
second.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, with that, we will move on to public hearing and possible motion regarding rezoning case 24CZ01, Viridia expansion number 2.
Yes, so you may recall last year we had our first expansion of the Viridia SD plan where there was just over 20 acres added. So this is a similar rezoning. This parcel is located along East Williams Street. It is 0.17 of an acre and is currently zoned residential agricultural. It is surrounded on the north, west, and south by the Viridia SD plan. And so the proposed zoning is SD, Sustainable Development Conditional Zoning. The 2045 land use map designates the parcel as mixed use, and the rezoning is consistent with the land use map. The applicant held their required neighborhood meetings in December and February, and you have those meeting reports. The UDO, just a reminder, the UDO states that a parcel of any size within 2,000 feet of an SD zoning district may be added to that same plan and adopt those same zoning conditions, and increase the development densities on a pro rata basis. And so that is what's happening here. Now, the applicant has indicated that they do not wish to increase the residential density, just as they indicated with the last expansion. And so this represents a 0.02% increase in the retail and office industrial square footage allowed. So if this rezoning is approved, the Viridia SD plan and the environmental enhancement plan that was adopted for it will apply to this parcel. This rezoning was exempt from meeting with the Environmental Advisory Board as it is less than an acre. And planning staff is recommending approval as presented by the applicant. It's consistent with the land use map, which designates the property as mixed use, and it's reasonable in the public interest because it will encourage more efficient and compatible development of the property and provide the same development standards that's applicable to the surrounding properties. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Amanda. Do you have any questions? All right. Do we have an applicant that would like to speak?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Jason Barron with Morningstar Law Group. I'm here to answer any questions you might have. Might be the simplest zoning case I've ever brought to the town of Apex, at the risk of jinxing it, of course. But happy to answer any questions you all may have. Thanks.
Meridia and simple. Be careful with it.
Fair.
Any questions for the applicant? All right, with that, I'm going to open the public hearing. Do you have anybody? Nope. All right, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for discussion and possible motion.
I have concern.
Yes, sir.
It's too easy.
All the hard work was done before us.
Yeah. I'm assuming this was just somebody owned this piece of property and then just decided to, there was an agreement that was made between Meridia and this landowner, and then that's just being swallowed into a bigger picture here.
Yeah, it's a parcel that became available after the original properties were acquired and zoned. Yep.
Very good. That's it.
Possible motion?
We have public.
I open and close.
Open and closed, okay. Hearing none, I'll speak. I will make a motion to approve case 24CZ01, the Meridia expansion number 2.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
I don't know who got that one first. Daniel? All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, that passes unanimously. And since we have no new business, I just need one more motion.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
I have a second.
Before we adjourn, I just wanted to say how excited I am to be here and appreciate everyone's support, and staff has been great so far. Had a great onboarding meeting with Amanda, and forgive me, I'm blanking on. Sorry, Diane. Gosh,
Don't forget Diane.
She's watching.
She's watching.
She's watching. Well, hopefully she's not, but yeah, no, I will pay for that one. But did have a great onboarding meeting, and so there's a tremendous amount of information out there and information to go over, but very excited about it. I want to just comment on one thing on my question that I asked earlier on item number 1, which was, this was a bit of an education for me. Madam Chair, you are correct in that all of the neighborhood meeting comments are provided in the backup. You all will find in my time here that I'm going to rely heavily on staff because I've sat in that seat for so many years. This is my first time on this side of the dais. Mm-hmm. And so I've spent many years right there and providing those presentations and responding. And so I rely very heavily on staff and in terms of their characterizations. And so I was curious what the characterization was of those meetings. And I've just since learned in this meeting today that staff doesn't attend those meetings. Am I correct?
We do not.
Yeah. So sometimes those staff characterizations can help, at least help me, because that was a tough one because we were kind of wrestling with it, but yet there was no one here to speak. And so I was curious, and having had 3 or 4 neighborhood meetings. So, I've got a big learning curve, I realize, but I'm excited about being here and I appreciate everyone's support.
We're glad you're here, and I use every opportunity I can, not just as learning for us, but a learning for the public at large. They don't always know, so I use that as an opportunity to a teaching moment for the public at large, because I didn't know until I started paying attention that all of these pieces were in. So
yeah,
good for folks to know. So thank you.
Thank you.
Before we adjourn, last Friday morning, and I don't know if Diane posted the link to it, but the mayor gave a state of the town of Apex to the chamber. my gosh, I was inspired after watching the video that was produced by staff and for the mayor. I would encourage everybody, if that link hasn't been posted, to watch that YouTube video. It makes you proud to be an Apexian. That's the word. But it was very well done, very encouraging, and it was pretty neat. So.
Also, before we adjourn, no, I'm serious. I hope everybody got a ticket to the 150-year history of Apex Play. We've been working on it really hard. I hope some of y'all come out and see it. Of course, we're sold out, so, but I hope y'all got some tickets. We've been having fun with that. Okay, no one else got anything to say, did he?
Although I'm gonna admit, y'all were awfully quiet today. I'm supposed to say that. You're talkative now, but you were awfully quiet. So I'm looking forward to more conversation, more quick motions or quick discussions. But if no one has anything else, I think I had a second too.
Yeah, Mr. Preston gave us a second.
Okay, so can I ask for ayes? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you all.
All right.
Daylight savings, getting